Hey everyone, my name is Micah, and I'm just a dude with an obsession for this game called Daggerfall Unity. If you know anything about Daggerfall, you've likely heard or experienced that this game has some absolutely huge dungeons. There's very little narrative cohesion in the design of these dungeons. They seem to go on downward inexplicably without much lateral movement, and the container you see on the outside it usually doesn't fit what's going on within the building, within the dungeon. So one of the most common criticisms about this game is that these dungeons they're just kind of objectively bad, and you're going to have a bad time while exploring these dungeons, and so many people recommend for new players, and probably rightfully so, just to, be cautious about these dungeons and give tips about how to dungeon delve as little as possible while playing Daggerfall. If you're a new player, that's totally reasonable, and even if you're an experienced player and that's just your preference, fine. I'm just a dude that really enjoys the dungeon delving aspect of Daggerfall, and I want to talk about that a little bit. And so I've brought my character out here to this random dungeon that I got from a Fighters Guild quest. And we're going to just go take a look at it while I rant about why I like Daggerfall's dungeons so dang much, why I can't stop playing this game, and how the gameplay loop focused around the dungeon is part of what keeps me coming back to it. Oh, hey look, there's somebody straight away. And I'm paralyzed just like that, but we get prepared to have some free action. Gonna murder that guy real quick and get to safety so I can keep talking. Alright, I think we're safe. That was one example of how these dungeons are wacky. You just walk into this central chamber being bombarded by spells. Alright, let's look at Daggerfall and its design relative to the context of the late 90s, if you were a nerd who enjoyed fantasy hobbies, you were probably playing some element of Dungeons and Dragons. You had quite a few options by the time the late 90s rolled around, but I believe that this game in particular tries to emulate the more dungeon delving focused games such as BX, Basic Expert, the game that was popularized in the 80s if I remember correctly. I don't know, I wasn't born yet. Regardless, that game, while it was a role-playing game, was focused around the core gameplay loop of going to grab loot in a dungeon, trying to see how much loot you could carry away from the dungeon, going to sell that loot so you could progress as a character, and then going back to a dungeon where you could fight things, get treasure, and you know what, you're going to go sell that treasure once you get done with that. Back in the day, gathering treasure was actually how your character advanced in classic versions of D&D. I'm just going to drop down my campsite to see if I can get a rest in. I took a lot of damage already. Anyway, back in the day, collecting treasure was how your character advanced whenever you were playing Dungeons & Dragons or other role-playing games. And so, whenever you have these huge dungeons that you would find in BX or sometimes AD&D, basically any of these older editions of Dungeons & Dragons, the expectation was not that you would go in and clear the dungeon. The expectation is that you would go in and accomplish your objective of gathering loot and explore as much of the dungeon as is conducive to that objective. You then get the hell out of there because dungeons are dangerous places with creepy monsters, traps, and all this disastrous stuff waiting to kill you. So I think a lot of the times whenever we play a dungeon crawler such as Daggerfall or its subsequent iterations like Morrowind or Oblivion, we kind of have this expectation that we're going to go into the dungeon and we're going to do everything. We're going to kill all the enemies, we're going to grab every piece of loot, and I'm of the opinion that you're going to have a kind of bad time when playing Daggerfall if that's your objective. I'm just going to a note right here that my campsite's back in this corner. Yeah, so outside of the main quest, it's really not much of a requirement for you to go through and do every single thing, or to even complete the quest objective in a dungeon like this. Let me see, how do I take the torch? There we go. Yeah, your dungeons should be conducive to gathering the loot you need. Now, obviously, I mentioned character progression being done through treasure in older editions of Dungeons and Dragons. That's not the case here. Maybe there's a mod for that, but I think that would be a really tough thing to balance in Daggerfall. But the idea is still the same. You want your character to progress whenever you come into a dungeon, or just in general. And I find that dungeons are the best places to find this kind of progression. Let me see if I can get this door now. You know, you have a lot of enemies to fight, you have chances to use your language skills to interact with enemies, you have chances to sneak, to lockpick, I think to some extent to pickpocket. That's more of an in-town burglary thing. Oh damn. Let's see, did I bring enough potions for this? Let's use a heal tree. Damn, this guy's killing me fast. I gotta do another heal true. Okay, I'm actually gonna retreat. I don't feel good about this, y'all, but here we go. Oh shit, we gotta get out of here. Alright. So, as I was saying, I'm gonna try to not get killed by these things. We're just gonna retreat a bit more. Who knows how many more of these things we're gonna find. I really don't know how many potions I brought. We're already running kind of low. This is not my main character, so I just kind of dipped back into this old save file to kind of show you around this dungeon as I explored it. It's thoroughly kicking my ass, which is part of the fun. Anyway, as I was saying, clearing the dungeon is not the objective at almost any point, and you honestly don't even need the quest objective that badly, as long as you accept the fact that if you fail a quest, you're going to lose like 1 point of reputation in your faction of choice. It's not the end of the world. It's going to happen sometimes, and like if you go into a place and you deplete your resources and you can't find the thing you need, you're just having a bad time, man, just get out of there. It's really not that bad. It's only main quest dungeons, if you're hoping to complete the main quest, that feel a bit more high stakes. This quest, by the way, is to kill giants, so it's really wacky that I'm running into this enemy type. To kind of elaborate further on how this game is a bit flawed in its dungeon design. Anyway, so these dungeons are huge, they feel like labyrinths, and that's part of the fun. Oh man, did I bring this? Let's see if I have any more free action. I don't think I do. Okay, we're gonna try to tank this, I guess. Alright, this guy's pretty puny. This will give me a chance to keep talking a bit about why I love these dungeons so much. The dungeons are huge, they are larger than the scope of your character, and while they don't make sense from a narrative design perspective, they are indeed part of a video game, and so part of playing a video game is suspending your disbelief for a bit in order to engage with it some. That leads me to my next point. I think a lot of the times whenever we sit down to play video games, we expect to have fun in a really literal sense of, I'm going to take a potion of purification real quick. Of like your brain's just going to be constantly pumping out some serotonin and dopamine for you, so that like you have this easy laid-back experience that has a bunch of great feedback loops for the chemicals your brain makes. I actually find video games are more satisfying whenever they are trying to be engaging without really trying to be overtly fun or simplistic. It's kind of hilarious. Talking about how much I love these dungeons while getting whacked while being utterly powerless. Anyway, a video game should be engaging rather than just blatantly fun, in my opinion. there are some things that are fun, that are not challenging, and because they are less challenging, they are simply not as satisfying as a game that tries to challenge you a bit. So, Daggerfall's dungeons present a series of challenges to you. Let me kick this nerd's ass real quick. He's out of spell points. He's paralyzing me. Asshole. Is there any good loot there? No. Okay. Anyway, as you can tell, these... Oh, damn! Let me get this little runaround going on here. Because one hit from this guy might kill me. I'm at a dead end. Let's chug another potion. Do the old run past. Dungeons in Daggerfall prevent... I just want to pick it up, bro. Alright, I'm not packing up my camp, I guess. We'll have more back in town. Dungeons in Daggerfall. They present a bunch of interesting challenges for you that exist beyond just the scope of your basic go in and feel powerful as you stomp a bunch of creatures, as you just saw. I mean, this dude is like, he's level 20, he has 100 strength, 100 endurance. It's actually the first character where I've ever had 100 in a skill before. He's very strong, but he can still get humbled by the enemies in this dungeon. So you're presented challenges in dungeons, including monsters, traps, time, resource depletion, and perhaps most important is the challenge of simple navigation. Alright, so to break this down a little bit, monsters, they want to kill you. You want to not get killed. Kill them if you want, but ultimately you mostly need to run away and just like get to the quest objective, or if the quest objective is a creature, you want to kill that creature. So there are monsters. There are also some traps. They are mostly harmless, or they are entirely too harmful. Alright, so you have little pits in the ground. Those don't really do much unless you aren't paying attention, or you are being chased by another enemy who... like the other day I fell into a pit that had a mummy in it because I was running away from a different mummy. So I feel like those traps are pretty useless outside of contexts like that. So aside from that, we face the issue of resource depletion. So this is a classic example of that. You saw me get my ass kicked by a bunch of liches and battle mages. I think I'm actually out of... Okay, so I have 4 potions of purification, which will serve as like full heals. But I'm out of all other kinds of... a potion of teleport. I don't know where that takes me to. Anyway, my resources have already been depleted. You have to really prepare whenever you go into a Daggerfall dungeon if you want to clear it all in one go. This brings me to my next point, which is that another challenge presented by dungeons is the time management aspect of it. So this giant killing quest, they honestly give you so much time, as is often the case, that it's not really very relevant. I'm in a relatively small region, and I've been given 28 days to complete this task. However, in my other character, let's go over here back to Daggerfall. So I'm playing an Iron Man character right now, doing some of the main quests, because I'd like to complete the game without dying one of these days. Yeah, the Queen of Daggerfall wanted me to go out to Castle Necromogon, which you can't see here. I haven't done any main quests with this character, but it's right out here in this region, right? So, going from Daggerfall out here to Castle Necromogon, you gotta go in and grab some parcels. That's pretty much all there is to it. It's a find a quest item kind of quest. She gives you 9 days to do it, which is kind of a small time frame, right? So, I mostly used travel options to trek across the land. Had to make sure I had a few potions to get there. However, I was a bit of a dingus. The name of the place, Castle Necromogon, will kind of indicate that there's a lot of undead there, and yet I only brought 1 potion of free action. So eventually I got paralyzed by a ghost. I used my 1 potion of free action, and I told myself that if I ever got like paralyzed again, I would have to, you know, get out of there or I might lose my character. This, by the way, is why I always bring, let me go back to my menu here, a potion of teleport. It's kind of like an oh shit button, you know, being able to cast your teleportation spell without being a caster. Eventually I got paralyzed by a ghost. I tanked a couple of those and burned a bunch of like healing potions, which was stupid, and you know, it's worth it sometimes, but I didn't immediately complete the quest right after, and so it felt like a waste. Eventually I got paralyzed in a position where I just didn't think I'd have like I'd survive it with the potions I had, and didn't want to spend a bunch of time searching for more healing potions, so I just noped out of there. And after spending like 3 or 4 days traveling there and resting in the dungeon, I teleported all the way back to Daggerfall, which is where my anchor was. Because if you don't cast these spells a lot, it's not always going to be close by. It's always good to have your anchor in a city where there's a temple, and so I warped back to, like, I think the Temple of Kinnereth. Unfortunately, I was still paralyzed whenever I got warped out there, and there were, of course, it's Daggerfall. I warped there at night, so there were more ghosts coming to paralyze me. I still just barely survived this whole debacle. But the point is, I spent some time getting there. I warped back. I had to go in this kind of funky line northward, hitting up every alchemist shop I could to find more potions of free action and potions of healing to restock my supply, along with potions of teleport, since you need one to lay the anchor and then one to use it again. And I just think that is so... I just love it. I really love having to track my resources. I like the danger that is imposed of, like, I could have just messed up the main quest if I had not prepared correctly or executed the tasks correctly. And I just love that about that. You know, if the dungeons are not huge, then you're going to kind of feel like you're in control the entire time. And that's a bit boring in my humble opinion. I really like to feel like that feeling of being up on the ropes whenever you're playing a video game that's really challenging, and you just barely survive. And you know what, this isn't an Iron Man character, so I'm just going to poke my head in here, and there he is. Keep trying to survive while I talk. Switch to my other hand. These liches are so tough. And even though, like, my stats are good, my archery is good, like, I can't hit this dude for shit. Alright, that's just a taste of the challenges that I think are presented. I really like whenever there's actual time constraints. Sometimes, like, you'll go to, you know, dungeon from Daggerfall and you're given like 150 days to do it, and it only takes a few days to get there. That's not so bad. Sometimes the situation with the time creates its own little dynamic. It presents a training arc to you, especially if you play without reloading your saves. The first thing that comes to mind is whenever in the main quest you're contacted by an agent of the Underking to get an artifact from Castle Ecolon, or something like that, whatever it's called. Castle Ligwich, it's in the province called Ecolon. You're given like 355 days to do that, and if you know what's in there, what kind of enemies you'll face, and you've been mostly like cruising along the main quest dungeons, you probably know that it's really dangerous and you'll want to be careful. And so having a time frame that large, especially since you get the quest like in Sentinel and you have to go all the way to the north of the map, having that large of a time frame is pretty interesting, because you're like, oh, how many levels can I get before going, oh, my campfire's gone, that's bullshit. How many levels can I get before I have to go do this quest? And you know, the longer you spend training, the less time you have to explore this huge dangerous dungeon. It's just like, I love these little micro decisions that you have to make in order to pilot your character safely. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the time limits imposed by this game. Of course, the biggest obstacle in this game is navigating these huge ass dungeons. It is possible though, and the game gives you a lot of options for being able to navigate the game well. So you saw earlier, I went to my map and I dropped a marker here. You can do this by double clicking anywhere. Oh, I just left an empty one. So I'll often do this like whenever I set up my campfire, because this is going to be a spot that I return to repeatedly. Let me grab one of those torches, by the way, or do I have one in my inventory? Alright. Man, this might be it for this guy. I'm just gonna go ahead and, you know, reload this here save so I can keep it. Alright, here we go, here we go, here we go. Let's just get on back in there. Kind of know what to expect. I normally don't reload saves like this, but this whole difficulty of navigating the dungeon while playing the game is why I'm using this character that I don't really touch anymore. Oh man, I think this might have been a mistake, to be honest. Alright, let's see how we can get out of here. Yeah, okay. Man, there are liches everywhere in this place. I came here to slay some giants. What the hell? Alright, let's... the cold's slowing me down, so I gotta put on a cloak. I really like just the loincloth on this guy normally, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Torch. Okay. Alright, let's see if we can put some distance between ourselves and all of our adversaries. Alright, here's one. We're super slow because of potion of limitation, so let's just free action. Is there another one? No, okay. We might be safe enough to camp here. Alright, so I've officially started taking some branching paths away from the entrance. And this is another instance where the mark feature comes into handy. So like, I'm right here, I'm about to make a decision between going to the left, just eastward, going southward, or going westward. And so I'm just going to go ahead and note that the entrance, oops, is to the north right there. And in this way, you're kind of like, I don't know if you ever looked at the inventory selection of an old game like Basic or Expert, Dungeons and Dragons, but for some reason you'll see some chalk there. You might be like, why the hell would an adventurer bring chalk into a dungeon? But whenever you consider that in these older games, the act of navigating the dungeon was part of the difficulty and part of where the difficulty generates from with dungeon levels and stuff like that, you can kind of understand why you would want to bring a piece of chalk and kind of, you know, leave some arrows pointing back to the entrance. So this is like a piece of chalk, but in Daggerfall. It's, I think it's one of the coolest parts about the game. I believe it existed in Arena also. And so if you're having a hard time telling which way the entrance is, I would just say, man, just like go through here. Oh, look, I'm just going to say that the entrance is back. I think it's to the east now. That's to the west. I left another empty marker there. Entrance. Nope, doing it wrong again. Alright. You can kind of leave this breadcrumb trail telling you where to go. Now, as you saw earlier, there's a bunch of ways that you want to be prepared when coming to a dungeon. Magical characters, they have it easy. They can cast all the things that they need, so they just need enough magicka to do it. I find it's a bit more fun if you don't use magic or you use like a limited amount of magic. So this character doesn't cast anything at all, and because he doesn't have any, you know, any magical skills, I don't let him use magic items except for the ones that you hold. So he's working just on potions, and that means before coming to a dangerous dungeon full of liches and sorcerers and stuff like that, you really want to stock up on free action potions. Or let's say you go to a dungeon that has thieves and things like that, you'll want potions of cure poison. Or even simple dungeons with like rats and shit. They can give you diseases. Carry some potions of cure diseases, or that just might be the death of you, you know what I mean? So part of the fun is thinking about what kind of resources you need to bring with you, and after depleting them, you might have to exit the dungeon and restock. Or if you're short on time, and like let's say you're doing a main quest dungeon, you'll have to just like make the decision between turning back or proceeding. And oh, I got 2 liches. It's a lich sandwich right here. There's pretty good tactics on their end to put me in a pincer like that. Okay. This might be a good spot to set up my camp. Anyway, resource depletion is a real consideration, especially if you're playing this game in the most satisfying way, which in my opinion is Iron Man, permadeath, hardcore, whatever you want to call it, where you don't reload. I'm not making a good example of that since this isn't a character. This is a character I made after losing so many low-level characters that I was like, I just want a strong dude. So he's just like a master of hand-to-hand. I was reading Fist of the North Star, and I really wanted a cool Kung Fu master character, so here we are. But these decisions about that will impact your survival are much more meaningful whenever you like have death on the line. You also shouldn't go in against a Sicilian if you have death on the line. That's besides the point. I think this guy might be a bit safer. Okay, cool. Stupid Lich doesn't know how to scale this like 89-degree angle wall. But yeah, my other characters that I don't reload on, it's just a really thrilling experience to explore these huge dungeons, because even a low-level creature like a spider that might paralyze you if you're not prepared, it's just terrifying. You know, it turns this game into a horror game. Even though you can technically defend yourself, there are so many ways to become defenseless that it's really, really just terrifying. And that's part of the fun. Like, I don't want a game that is just really easy to steamroll everything. I don't want to feel like I am stronger than everything around me and like the game can't present real threats to me. Of course, this game is super, super easy to exploit and to negate those challenges. But, you know, even though Bethesda makes like terrible games, generally, like, I guess it's a kind of hot take. But they are generally just kind of terrible, poorly designed games that are easy to exploit and break. But the great thing about them is you can use your own roleplay restrictions to make them engaging, and additionally there are a lot of mods that make the game even more engaging. So let's talk a little bit. I'll come back to the mods topic, but I wanted to touch a little bit about this feature. Let's go take a look at my encumbrance right now. I'm pretty light with this character because he's really strong. He has 100 strength, and he only carries the bow and some arrows along with his potions. But like I mentioned earlier, like in old school Dungeons and Dragons games, how much loot you can carry is super important. If you've played Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition or Pathfinder or something, you might be used to like hand waving that part of the game. But in older editions, you can use slots or the coin system to give some idea of how much you're carrying. The more you carry, the slower you move, and thus the more susceptible you are to enemies. And so every time you pick up treasure, you're making this decision of whether or not this is really valuable enough to take out of the dungeon with you. And like I said, I really love these little micro decisions that add a bunch of meaning to your playthrough. So one thing to keep in mind in Daggerfall is that your gold has weight. I think this guy's riches are mostly in letters of credit. Like, yeah, he's 26k, 42k. It's he's not super rich, but you can tell he's been around. But while you're in the dungeon collecting gold and collecting loot, you'll pick up a lot of encumbrance. And if you're playing with Roleplay and Realism on, like many of us do, that's going to slow you down a ton. It's going to impact your ability to bob and weave safely in combat. And so yeah, preparing for the dungeon by bringing the right amount of potions and equipment is so cool. It's not as relevant with this guy, but let's see. My Daedric shortbow is used. Another consideration is keeping your gear up to date and like repaired. It's another aspect of preparation that I find really, really. I'm just glad it's there. You know, I'm glad weapon durability is there. So to talk a little bit about the mods that help this game feel really fun, or the dungeons specifically. Like, I get that finding the quest target is going to be a real nuisance a lot of the time, but a couple mods off the top of my head make it a lot easier for you. First off, the Penwick Papers mod, you probably know it as a kind of an overhaul for thief-type characters, but it also adds this potion of seeking, and whenever you use it... oh, look, it already told me something. It'll give you a little blurb of text up here at the top that kind of directs you toward your quest target. So it told me that it was north and higher, so I'm just going to go make a note. I'm going to say POS for Potion of Seeking or Piece of Shit. And I'm going to say north higher, which is what it told me. And now you're kind of playing a game of hot and cold, because this potion does have a limited duration. But if we go northward... Oh, shit. It's dark. I have the ambient... Oh. That's terrifying. It's pretty cool how it lit up the dark, though. I have the ambient dungeon light off. We want to go north and higher if at all possible. Oh, west and higher. So we got another blurb. So I'm just going to mark west, higher. Oh, look, we're going west. Great. Oh, there's a lich. Let's just walk right past him. I don't see any paths that go higher up. I have a feeling that this is looping around near the... Yeah, I recognize this from before we reloaded our saves. West and higher. How do we... Southwest and higher. Okay, so I'm not going to keep chasing it because I have no intention of completing this, but you get what I mean? Like, you can kind of use this kind of potion to make it easier for you. Additionally, you might be familiar with the Archaeologist Guild. It's kind of a guild with a language emphasis. They offer you locator devices where instead of giving you text pop-ups, you'll see a sort of golden ring if you're close enough to the target, which will direct you toward the quest. Oh, how will I get myself out of this one? I don't think I will. This guy's gonna kill me. Let's press the oh shit button, and we're definitely gonna fail the quest now. I've never used the oh shit button with this character before, and this might take a minute, so... Oh look, I'm in Sentinel, that's not bad. I thought that I was way up here, honestly, in Glenumber Moors, or Northmoor. Still paralyzed, so let's just write it out for a second. Yeah, so Potions of Seeking, Locator Devices, those both help you to navigate the dungeon. And so if you're over here using multiple Potions of Seeking, I usually carry like 3 with me, you can kind of trace all over the map these directives about where the quest target is. It really helps these huge dungeons become more manageable, and all the while you get to explore just however much you want or need of the dungeon. Often I'll find the quest target kind of quickly and be like, okay, now let's see how much loot and experience I can get before leaving the dungeon. And it's just part of the game, man. So I understand if you're new to the game that these huge dungeons can be daunting, or if you simply don't have a lot of free time, they can be daunting. I'm kind of a new parent, and I have a full-time job, so I don't have a ton of time to dedicate to video games. But I still just love the huge dungeons in this game. So play with smaller dungeons enabled if you'd like. Cliffworms has a mod out there that will make the main quest dungeons feel like one of those smaller dungeons without losing their thematic elements to them. So if you like the smaller dungeons and don't know about that mod, you should definitely check it out. But I kind of wanted to make this video to just to make a case for these huge-ass dungeons. It's true that they are sloppy, they have very little to no narrative cohesion besides kind of having the same groupings of enemies clumped together. But the dungeons in old school Dungeons and Dragons, and thus in this game, Daggerfall, this beautiful little game of ours, the dungeons are bigger than the character. You are not exactly intended to clear them. I'm rolling my eyes as I say the word clear because like the concept is unheard of in like older editions of Dungeons and Dragons. Because the dungeons are living and breathing things with other organisms in there, other factions at play, and you're kind of an intruder, and they're kind of there to gain character progression and loot. It's not there for you to just totally devastate the entire ecosystem. You're there to get in and get out, accomplish an objective. And I guess part of why I sort of shake my head whenever people talk about how bad the dungeons are is like, man, the dungeon is the whole game. All of this, like, sure, I love, like, running from roof to roof. I love playing thieves, and I love, like, saving up gold for training and stuff like that. But the dungeon is the game. The whole gameplay loop is focused around the dungeon. And so whenever we have a really negative attitude about these dungeons, and yes, they are certainly bullshit sometimes, but if we keep a negative attitude about them, we are determining ourselves to have a bad time in those dungeons. Whenever the game vanilla gives you some tools to play with it, to navigate these dungeons and to overcome them, Daggerfall Unity in particular, with those potions that I pointed out, and the optional things like smaller dungeons, they give you all the tools you need to enjoy an awesome, challenging, engaging dungeon delving experience. Yes, it's easy to exploit the game, but you don't have to exploit the game. That's a choice of yours. So I really recommend stopping what you're doing. Go play some Daggerfall Unity. Go talk to NPCs until you get a quest to go into a dungeon. And just do your very best, you know what I mean? if you find a map to something that doesn't have a quest target, you know, you'll find maps as loot or something like that, or from the Thieves Guild. Go check that out, man. You can explore as much or as little of that dungeon as you want, and you don't have the burden of a quest target to bring you down. It's just awesome whenever you find those things. I'm not sure if I had anything else that I wanted to say about this topic, but I just love Daggerfall's dungeons. I understand that they are really flawed. They don't really make a lot of sense from a narrative perspective or anything like that, but we are playing a video game right now, and so if you suspend your disbelief some, if you go in there with the right attitude and use the tools that are at your disposal as the player, I think you might love them. You know, maybe not as much as, you know, masochists like myself who have rewired their brains to create a positive feedback loop from these often excruciating, laborious dungeons. But yeah, I hope you enjoy them. I hope this little discussion, this rant of mine, makes you reconsider the daunting elements of the dungeon and maybe play with smaller dungeons off once in a while and see what happens, you know. Try not to clear the dungeon, but just to experience it as much as you can. And yeah, I'm going to stop recording and go back to my my Iron Man character now. I'll talk to y'all later. Oh man, something I totally neglected to talk about was one of the mods that's really made dungeon diving a lot of fun for me recently, and that's climates and calories. You might recognize that as the mod that makes you keep track of some survival elements, like it's important to dress warmly enough. It looks like I don't have enough clothing on. I went back to my Iron Man character, by the way, for just to poke around in Dungeon. So let's put on some clothes, keep track of that. Another survival element is that you can only rest near a campsite or a bed, basically. So you can see I have a campsite here by the entrance. And what I like about this element in particular is that it makes you keep track of the fires you find in the dungeon. Because you can use not only your campsite, just like a bed and a fire, whatever you want to call it, but you can also rest at like these braziers, fire braziers, or beds that you find inside of dungeons. So as you are navigating away from this campsite, it's kind of like your home base, right? Like you just refill on health there because you don't want to run out of healing potions. So I'll often backtrack and come back to it. And then while you're exploring, you might stumble upon something like this. I've already found it, but I'll show you. Let's turn a couple times. Oh, here it is. And these are like, this is like a godsend. If you're in a dangerous dungeon, this is like finding a bonfire in Dark Souls or Elden Ring or something like that. They kind of serve as implicit checkpoints for you, and now whenever I explore this dungeon further, it's going to be kind of just seeing what my options are, like going down here until I need to retreat and rest some more. I might come down this way until I need to retreat and rest some more. And I also like to keep track of these fires. Sometimes you can see it on the map if it's like a hearth. What am I trying to find? Fireplace is the word I'm looking for. Anyway, this one doesn't show up, so I'm just going to mark it as a fire. And so, looking at my map, I have a couple of spots here, this little blip and this little blip, that mark rest areas. And I just gotta say, it makes this game so fun to have that kind of implicit checkpoint system. Oh, here's another one. So yeah, climates and calories, it makes checkpoint systems for you. By restricting the places where you rest, it encourages you to kind of hole up somewhere instead of resting in the center of a hallway. You actually couldn't do that in Elder Scrolls Arena. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to be in a place where a monster might walk by. And so I think it's pretty cool to have to camp somewhere that's a bit secluded. I usually leave my camp spot in just one location because, correct me if I'm wrong, people, but this loses durability every time you drop it down. And so keeping it anchored for just like one deployment per dungeon is ideal. Anyway, this mod is made by Ralzar. He makes a bunch of really great mods that you should check out, including climates and calories. I think that's all I wanted to say about it this time. I'm just going to throw this at the end of the video because I don't care to learn about video editing. So yeah, go download climates and calories, disable smaller dungeons to play with the vanilla-sized ones, and yeah, embark on these dangerous-ass dungeon dives. You got it, man. I believe in you.